So I'm making this to have some sort of documentation of what's happened and what my last 6 months have looked like. Also to just sort of like compare where I'm at now to where I'll be in the future. I think it's pretty good to be able to like look back and see. And then also it might be able to help someone else in a similar situation. Up until now, I haven't said anything because it's pretty hard to talk about. And also it's an emotional burden to have people reaching out to talk or like say how you're doing and say like I'm worried about you. Some people it's good to hear from, but no matter what, it's emotionally laborious to have to like read and respond to whatever someone has said to you. Also, this has been the single worst experience of my life so far, and hopefully my entire life going forward. And I really just don't want to have a bunch of randos like walking up and trying to talk to me about it in public. Like that just sounds terrible, and I don't want to do that. So general timeline of symptoms was on April 8th. I got pretty drunk, and then in the bathroom I fell down and chipped my tooth. And then actually, I had the mold replaced, so I got 2 fake teeth now. And then obviously I smacked my face pretty hard and was like fine. Didn't have like any bruising besides like a couple cuts. April 30th, I fell off a bully in Little Cottonwood and hit my shoulder like not very hard, and then had like a huge bruise from it. I think it was like this big. That was like the first onset, or like the first time I noticed that something was wrong. But who does anything at the first sign? And then after that, the bruising continued to get worse to the point where any like little impact, I would like have a bruise from it. I remember specifically there's one time I was like reaching for something in the fridge and I just like missed and kind of like hit the tops of my fingers, and then my cuticles were bruised after that. What really drew the line was on May 17th, the teeth I got put in, so the fake teeth here, they were bleeding just like all day, like they kind of didn't really stop. And then on top of that, I climbed at cats the night before, and I just like had like a really minor dry fire. And then the tips of my fingers actually got bruised from that. And that's like, I've had them get like a little bit bruised from bad dry fires, but nothing like it was like a really minor dry fire, and I still got bruising from it. So that was like, that's where I like drew the line. So I reached out to a friend of mine that's a doctor and asked her like, when is this going to be concerning, or like, should I go like see someone about this? And she asked for some other like symptoms I've been having. I'd been having like a little bit of fatigue, which I kind of chalked up to being just like a little bit like out of shape or like coming out of the winter. And then also, she asked if I had like petechiae, like anywhere else on my body, like little red dots, which I actually did have on my legs. So she told me to go to an urgent care and get a CBC done, or complete blood count, just like a blood test to see like what was going on. So I went to an urgent care. They did the CBC. And they found that my platelets were at 5. The normal range for a healthy person is between 150 and 400. So that was really low. My friend told me, like, took one look at that and was like, I mean, she was like crying on the phone and basically told me I had to go to an ER like immediately, and that I should call my parents and tell them to come into town. So I drove over to Anschutz, which is like the main hospital in town, because she told me that they'd be the best at dealing with what it was, or what it could be. And I walked in, and then I didn't walk out for another 35 days. And then they repeated the tests they did at the urgent care, and then did some other ones. I forget what they were, but they poked me a bunch of times. I always thought I had like good veins. I've been around medical people, like just like friends, and they was like, oh, you got good veins. Turns out that's a load of crap. It's even though they look good, they're never that good for putting needles in, so they had to poke me a bunch of times. And then after a couple hours, told me that it was most likely leukemia, or in this case AML, acute myeloid leukemia, which is the most common type. If you ever have to get a bone marrow biopsy done, I would really recommend doing it with sedation. Don't do it. Don't hit it raw. It's not fun. So AML is a type of bone marrow cancer. Normally, bone marrow produces all the cells of your blood, which are red blood cells, platelets, which are for clotting, and white blood cells. But with AML, your bone marrow stops functioning normally, and just churns out white blood cells, specifically immature white blood cells called blasts. And it underproduces red blood cells and platelets. When I was admitted to the hospital, that's why I had so few platelets. Like, it was low enough that when they admitted me, they wouldn't let me get out of bed. They were like, if you need to like get up and use the bathroom, like you need to call someone in, and they'll like walk you to the bathroom. Like, they were so low that if I like fell down, I would probably die. So they started me on chemo pretty much immediately. Like, they did the biopsy, and then they kind of just like started chemo like immediately without waiting for results. And so they did 7+3, which is the traditional treatment for leukemia. It's been around for decades, I think since like the 70s. And it's not very it's like not targeted at all. Treatments for leukemias get very specific or like very targeted depending on what you have. So the 7+3 wasn't targeted at all because they had no results yet and didn't know what I had. And actually there was one time when I was still hooked up, and my brother came to visit, and he had dyed his hair in solidarity, so he had blonde hair, and I still had my hair at this point when it was blonde. And he was, I forget if he was walking in or out of the room, but my nurse saw him and saw that he was just like up and walking around without hooked up to an IV, and she thought that he was me, and she just like yelled at him. And it's like, what are you doing? You shouldn't be out of bed. You should be hooked up to your chemo. Like, what are you doing? The first round of chemo was ineffective and didn't really do a whole lot. So they started me on a second round, and this time results had come back from the biopsy, so they knew exactly what I had. So they started me on azacitidine, venetoclax, and gilteritinib, are the names of the 3 chemos. The azaven treatment was like extremely new. Like, I think only the abstract had been published of the research on it. So shout out Dr. Pallier for being just like really on top of everything. Yeah, Anschutz has a pretty good bone cancer program, so if you get that, you know, it's not a bad place to be. As Dr. Pallier put it, Dana-Farber certainly would have done no better. But when they started the second round of chemo, and actually through the whole second round of chemo, I was feeling pretty pessimistic, and I fully thought I was going to die. So after like the first 7 days, like they were allowed to release me from the hospital, so they just like set me loose. And that was like pretty hard, because I found it easier to be in the hospital and getting treatment than out of the hospital and getting treatment. Because I don't know, I thought it was like a bit easier to compartmentalize and be like, okay, I'm in the hospital, I'm sick, I'm getting treatment, versus I'm out of the hospital and it just sort of like, it feels like you're the fish from Finding Nemo when they like escape and they're just like in the plastic bags in the ocean. It's like, well, now what? You know, you might be out of the hospital, but you still have cancer, and you still feel like you're gonna die. And actually that first day my family threw like a little party for me. Like, the house had like some decorations on it, and that was actually like, that was really hard. That was like, I had to like smile through it or like pretend to be like kind of happy, but it was really hard because I still just felt like I had cancer. And it's like, okay, I'm out of the hospital, but I'm in this house. I've never been to it. This is just a totally new place. All my stuff is moved. My car's been cleaned out, which was the only thing I had that was like mine, because I got kicked out of my house. So then on June 14th, they said I was in remission, thankfully. You know, I kind of like imagined like what it'd be like to be told I had remission, and I thought that I'd be like really excited or like celebrate, but it didn't really feel any different, and it took a while to set in and kind of settle in. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna die now. So then after that, I think I checked back in the hospital on June 28th to begin transplant, or bone marrow transplant. They hit me with another week of chemo and then blasted me with some radiation to effectively wipe out my bone marrow so that mine was dead. And then they bring in the new cells, which is, they did a haplocord transplant, which was half my brother. And then half donor cells from umbilical cord blood. Basically what happens is that my brother's cells took over for the first like month or whatever, and then the umbilical cord blood comes in and takes over and basically replaces your bone marrow. So if you did a biopsy right now, the DNA is not mine. It's some random Spanish baby. So that was another 24 days in the hospital. Mentally, that was quite a bit easier than the first round, because it was like, okay, I know this has an end. It's gonna go well. Like, I'm not gonna die. Physically, it's quite a bit harder. Symptoms after that were quite a bit worse than both the first and second round of chemo. Nausea that went on for like months afterward. Like I'm at like 3 months in at this point, and it's like kind of like barely stopped. Like I think up until like 2 months, I was still like pounding Zofran and Compazine and just like trying not to be nauseous all the time. They let me out after 24 days, and then they let you ring a bell when you get out. It's like very exciting. All the nurses are psyched and tearful and so happy to see the person they've been caring for a couple months to get released from the hospital.
Okay, got it. All right. This is pretty much it. Now ring the bell.
That was it. Yay! Yeah! Yeah!
And then actually I got readmitted to the hospital like less than 24 hours after I got let out because I was fevering, and that's really dangerous because you don't have any immune system at that point. So they stuck me in there for another 5 days, and you just get like antibiotics, and like they'd wait for the fevers to go away and then they let you go. All told, I spent 67 days in the hospital so far. Fingers crossed it stays at 67. As far as side effects go, hair loss from chemo. So I lost my hair twice for the first round of chemo and then the third round. The second round, that one didn't cause hair loss. So I kind of I had like peach fuzz in my head. It was like kind of gross looking. Not all chemos cause hair loss. So if someone says they have cancer and they still have their hair, don't judge them for that. Weight loss. I started about 130 pounds. And then I think at my lowest, I was around like 110. I'm starting to put weight back on, but I still have like a low appetite. I'm not nauseous anymore, thankfully. You know, it's slow going. And then also fatigue. When they released me and I was back in the house, I could like barely walk around the block. And then my legs were like shaking when I was like walking up or down the stairs, which still happens a little bit, but not as bad. After I had appendicitis and I was released, I tried doing some pull-ups, and I could only do 3. The last time I could only do that many was actually in like 3rd grade, the like first time I ever tried doing pull-ups. I did 3. It's coming back, but you know, really slowly. And then weirdly, another symptom that I've had that's popped up more recently is that I've actually gained hair. Like my stash is a lot thicker. There's more hair like on my body. Like there's hair like on my legs and chest now. I think it's from the radiation. Might be permanent. I kind of hope not. The stash is kind of nice, but the rest of the hair I don't like it. I don't think it's worth it. What's next for me? My life has been effectively destroyed. I kind of lost interest in climbing. I'll probably get back into it once I'm like more in shape or like not struggling so much. I can drive again, thankfully. They didn't want me driving for like a couple months after transplant. I've started lifting or like working out again. That's been pretty nice, and I've been feeling better since doing that. And like actually setting some goals for like, okay, I like want to be at like this weight by the new year. Started looking at apartments again to move out from under my parents' thumb and get some independence back. Cause you know, I'm like an adult. Hoping to get an apartment around the new year and then be back to being independent. That's kind of it for the plan going forward. Yeah, I don't know the next time I'll make a video. It's kind of, you know, not really the most important thing. I don't know. Make sure you check your skin, boobs, balls, and bones for anything concerning. You don't want to let that stuff slide. It can be dangerous.